All right. Looks like we've got a good group of people here already today. So I think we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for taking your time today to join us in our session for advanced content creation using the Evolution CMS. We appreciate you taking your time today to learn with us and hope on you improve your skill set with EVO, and then in turn, you can improve your parish web presence. My name is Nico Karitzis, and I am a software developer for the Department of Internet Ministries. And I will be joined in the presentation today by my co-presenter, Jamil, who most of you or all of you probably know. And he will be going through our demos for us a little bit later today. So let's go ahead and get started. A few housekeeping items before we really dive in. Please make sure that you mute your microphones during the presentation itself. We will save time at the end for questions. We'll make sure we have a chance to go through all of your questions or comments. And so we ask that you save those to the end. If you have a question during the presentation, feel free to add it to the chat during the time so you don't forget it. You can also list your questions yourself on your end and then ask them over the microphone at the end as well, whatever you're most comfortable with. So today we are going to be reviewing a few different things. Hopefully you have all gotten your basic content into place on your websites. And so now you're ready to take your websites to the next step. So the first thing we want to talk about are the building blocks of EVO. You're most likely familiar with adding and editing content on your website, but did you know that there are more dynamic elements behind the scenes that are actually making your website function? So we want to look at those today and then see how we can leverage those to make your websites do even more things. Once we do that, we'll take those building blocks of EVO and we're going to see how we can put them together to create some entirely new sections of content for your website. We may be creating content sections that you already have the content for, or perhaps you're going to get some ideas on new content you can bring to your website. Finally, we will do some showcases and a live website on how we're going to set these up. We have 4 different demos set up for you today, and hopefully at least one of them, if not all of them, will be very helpful to you. And finally, we will wrap up with our Q&A. So any questions you have during either the demo or the presentation part or anything else, we will be ready for, and we will be able to answer your questions then. So hopefully everyone here is somewhat familiar with the Evolution CMS manager. We have labeled this as advanced content, so we're hoping you've at least logged into your system and you know something about the manager itself. Right on the screen now, you should be seeing a picture of what the EVO manager looks like. On the left-hand column, you know the site tree, which lists all of your resources and links, and this is how you're able to access your content. On the top part, you are most likely familiar with the navigation there, although you might not be completely familiar with what those items are, but thankfully we'll be talking about those today. And then in the right section is your main content area where you are typically going to be editing your content, but you can also access some additional menus. And today we're going to be talking about the Manage Elements section, specifically the items that we have listed here under Manage Elements, which are templates, template variables, chunks, snippets, and plugins. So first up is templates, and these are the framework for all of the resources or pages in EVO, which are built in HTML. Templates define how the page will look when it all comes together. For example, the site's navigation, the number of columns and rows on the page, where the side navigation appears relative to the body content. And these are specific to individual pages. So, oh, I'm sorry, that is, now they're specific to each individual page. This means that you can use the Uses Template drop-down menu to choose a template for each page. Most parishes currently are using a single homepage template because your homepage is perhaps a little more complex with different columns. And then you're most likely using a single template on all of your content pages. So that might be a left-hand column page or a right-hand column page or maybe a full width page, but you do have the ability to change these. So if you start to see sections on your website and say, you know, this website or this section would look a lot nicer if I had content displayed a different way, or maybe I need to change some colors or some navigation, you can do all of that through templates. So as you can see in this example, the template would be wrapping around the content itself. We have the title of the content at the top of the page, which is the Welcome to the Community of Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral. Below that, you have an image and some text. That is all the content, but everything else surrounding this is part of the template. So the template is defining where that content goes and then how everything looks around it.
And we're going to see some of the things that Nico's pointing out, we will show during the live demo. That what Nico mentioned, the Uses Template pull-down menu, we'll show you where that is in a few minutes.
Absolutely. So next up is the template variables. Template variables are the additional content fields you see on the page. So they're additional boxes where you can put specific content for that template. They are tied specifically to the template on each page. And so the home page, for example, there are a lot of extra fields. We know that we have content block 2 and even 3. There's information cards you can use, page backgrounds, or the carousel items that are on the page. Those are all template variables. So you may know them as the extra boxes on the page where you put images or you put extra text. But within the EVO side and the development side, these are known as template variables, and they're connected to each specific template. So if you change the template from maybe a left column to a full column, you may see less options. Or if you were to change it to a homepage template for some reason, you would see a lot more options there. So those are the way that you can expand a template and get more content into that template. And in case you are doing development and you're doing something advanced, which is part of what we're talking about here, but we still encourage everyone to listen through if you're not advanced in using template variables in this way, because you can still use template variables just by adding content to them. So if you do need to develop a template yourself and you want to refer to a template variable, you use either the bracket asterisk or the bracket plus sign notation to be able to pull those templates in. So the template variable example we're showing on the screen here, and you'll see some more later during our demo, is the page carousel. Hopefully everyone is familiar with this in your own parish websites, but you have the ability to add an image, the title, the text, the link, and all of that is content that exists in the home page, but it exists inside of a template variable. Next up, we have chunks. Chunks are a block of HTML code that can be used for a variety of purposes. They make it very easy to preserve the HTML, JavaScript, or CSS formatting you have. One great use for chunks is if you've been given code from an external service or an external website and you want to add it to your own website. A lot of people have tried maybe getting code from PayPal or something like a Google Calendar embed, and you paste that right into the content of your site, and when you hit publish, something doesn't work quite right. The editor on EVO isn't great with code. It doesn't like to go through that and display it because code isn't always meant to be displayed. Sometimes it's meant to be interpreted by the browser and do something. So using a chunk means you can put that code you've been given directly in a piece of content called a chunk, and then you can refer to that chunk on your pages. And that will make sure that everything is preserved from the way you received it from your vendor. Chunks are also used as templates within snippets. That may not make a ton of sense for you yet, but I promise it will make much more sense once we get to the demo. Essentially, we need to tell the snippets how to do something and how to make it look visually, so we can use a chunk to lay that out. And in order to call a chunk, this might be much more useful over the last thing with template variables. You simply use the opening curly braces. There's 2 of them. You use the name of the chunk. Even if there are spaces, you include the spaces and you use the capitalization as it's called. And then you use 2 closing curly braces. Wherever you put that content, that in a content page, instead of showing the curly braces in the name, your page will actually show the contents of that chunk. So it's a great way to embed code. Here's an example of a single news template chunk that has been written. You don't need to really understand what most of these things are now, but just be aware that the chunks exist with their own name. It's great when they have descriptions. The better descriptions you give, the easier it is for other developers to work with what you've done. And then you have the chunk code, which is where you would be pasting some either an iframe or maybe a script tag from an external vendor. Next up is snippets. Snippets are blocks of PHP code, and they are used to extend and enhance the functionality of the front end of your website. So if you are trying to create something that needs a little bit more logic than HTML or something like that, snippets are where you're going to do that. They're great for enhancing website functionality because they are able to do very complex tasks. We are going to be looking majorly at snippets today and chunks as well, but a lot of the functionality you're going to be seeing in our demos comes from snippets. The great thing about snippets is that there's many already included with Evolution CMS that already come with your site. We have also built some custom for GOA parishes and other Orthodox parishes using our templates that can be helpful for using content from either external sources or displaying the online chapel or things like that. The other thing you can do, and we really haven't seen parishes really dig into this yet, but there is a package manager for Evolution. And if you are looking for functionality that doesn't exist, you are certainly welcome to look in the extras manager. Be aware that not everything there is going to be fully documented or tested the way you might need it to be. So take that with a grain of salt. And if you want to do that, just make sure you're comfortable digging in there. And as we always say, make sure you're doing backups before you do any major changes on your website. If you need to add a snippet to one of your pages or one of your templates, you simply call it with the opening brackets. There's 2 of them, or with the opening bracket and an exclamation point. It depends if you're calling your snippet in a cached manner or an uncached manner. We will talk about that in a couple slides, so hopefully that will make a lot more sense to you shortly. Here's an example of one of our snippets, which is the online chapel. This is just a small snippet of the snippet, so you don't see the full code here. But just like chunks, they have a title, there is a description to let you know what it's supposed to do, and then the PHP code itself is directly saved into the manager. And lastly, we have plugins. So plugins are blocks of PHP code to enhance the back end of our website, whereas snippets were the front end. The back end of the manager is enhanced by plugins. You're probably familiar with at least one of these, which I'll mention in a moment, but these are PHP. And this is a more advanced topic, but they are attached to events within Evolution. So every time something happens in Evolution, we say an event is fired. So maybe every time a page is loaded, that is considered an event. And if we want something to happen every time the page loads or every time maybe a manager opens a content to edit, then that's what we use plugins for. Really, you don't need to know a lot about these in this session. We don't plan to talk about them much in this session, but we wanted to point it out because it is part of the Manage Elements section. And right now on the screen, you can see the tiny MCE editor, which hopefully everyone is familiar with. And this is actually a plugin. So the way that your editor is being loaded is through plugins. So you don't need to know how to write these. You don't even need to know where they are, but just know that plugins are in use on your website and they're working to make the functionality enhance in your manager. So the next thing we wanted to bring up very briefly is the EVO manager versus the file system of your website. The topic is probably most useful for advanced users. Basic and intermediate users should be comfortable with the manager itself, and you can take care of pretty much your whole website using the EVO manager. If you are an advanced user and you want to start exploring snippets and writing your own code, a lot of the code exists within the file system itself, so you don't see it directly in the Evolution manager. So we wanted to point that out because you may need to access the file system at some point, and if you do, you can do that through FTP clients, you can do it through cPanel's file manager, or you can do it through Evolution itself using the elements and manage files there. The permissions through EVO are not quite as in-depth as you may need, so you may not be able to access or edit certain files directly through EVO, but if you're developing custom snippets, you most likely will be familiar with FTP clients or cPanel. So the next thing that we wanted to discuss is EVO caching with snippets. Many times, people are running into, let me back up here. So first, let me mention what caching is. Caching exists to help speed up page loads. This means that EVO will take all of the pieces that make up your page and build it ahead of time so that when someone visits your website, the page is already assembled as HTML and it's ready to be displayed in the user's browser. If you're familiar with other CMSs, you may be familiar with, say WordPress or Joomla or something like that. You may notice that they don't always load as fast as an EVO website. EVO websites are great with caching. They do a very good job and they use a lot of caching to make the pages load very quickly, which is great. But every once in a while, you could run into a problem where your page is over caching content that you don't want it to cache. So let's say you have a snippet. The example I have on the screen is the online chapel, and you need it to display every time someone visits the page, and you want to make sure it's always updated every time someone visits the page. If your content is being cached, then EVO may save a copy of the online chapel from a few days ago and continue to display that. So the example I have on the screen right now, this would be great if I had visited the site on January 18th, which is what we're seeing here in the date. The problem is I visited the site today, which is January 25th. So in order to get the right date, we need to make sure that the snippet is being called in a non-cached way, basically telling the system, you can build the rest of this page ahead of time, but you need to check this snippet every time someone is accessing. So you can see down below here, we are calling it with double brackets, and that means you can cache the results of this snippet. So On the flip side, if I want to see what today's date was really returning, I need to call this snippet using the uncached method, which is the bracket and exclamation point. That tells EVO's cache management solution, you need to check this page every single time someone loads it to make sure that the content is fresh. So here's our side-by-side, and we can see that the date is wrong when we're using the the cached version, but the date is correct once we are caching this content. So I know that's a little bit more of an advanced topic to talk about caching here, but if you are going to be developing snippets, it's important to know that the content might be cached, and that could cause problems for what you're developing. Let's see here. Yes, okay, so documentation. The code base for EVO is maintained by a group of developers, many of which are Russian. So they do a great job and the code works very well, but the documentation for this code is written in Russian, which means that sometimes you want to look into documentation for code and you may not find English documentation. A lot of it's been localized. Any that has not been localized can be done through Google Translate for the most part, but you might run into some issues there. We do a good job when we can of trying to localize the documentation ourselves for the most common things that parishes are using. But if you're exploring the more advanced features in documentation, you may run into sections that are specifically or solely in Russian. If you are interested in reading the documentation, you can easily find it through a quick web search. So now we are getting to the point where we are going to be doing 4 live demos today. For each one, we're going to demonstrate what the front-end user experience will be. We also want to show the components needed to create it, and then we are going to add the content to it. So you can see how it would be set up on your website and how you would maintain it. So the demos today are going to be one for Google Calendar. For Google Calendar, we are going to be showing the GoogleCal snippet as well as the FullCalendar snippet. We're also going to talk about embedding YouTube videos. We'll be using a YouTube video snippet along with the template variable and potentially chunks. And then we will be doing a live demo of the sermon or news section, which uses the DocLister, as well as a YouTube embed. And then finally, we are going to do automatic page listings. So you could use something like DL menu, which is going to show a list of all of the pages on the website, or something like DocLister, which is going to be a little bit more visual and show you the list of pages along with the links and the images. Now, keep in mind that the customizations that we are going to show you are not necessarily right for your parish specifically, but instead they're examples of things that you can do with your website. Every parish has specific content and specific needs for their web presence. For example, if you see the sermon section and you love that and say, I want to create a sermon section for the parish, but you don't have anyone recording sermons and no one has ever written a sermon down in your parish, it's going to be very hard for you to maintain a sermon section without the content for a sermon section. So we're happy to help try and inspire you to create new content if you don't have it, or help you try and find ways to use the content you already have. But don't take this as our trying to tell you, you have to implement these 4 demos directly on your website in the next week to make everything better. Take these as examples on how you can start thinking creatively and how you can start displaying content in ways that are going to be more appealing to users and help them find your content. And we are happy to help with that if you need some help evaluating the content you have, or maybe the content you want to start creating, and giving you some ideas on how you can start listing that on your website. So with that, I am going to turn over to Jamil, and he will be running our demos today.
Great. Let me just get my screen shared.
Sure.
All right, how does that look? Do you see the EVO login?
Yes.
Okay, great. So always a starting point when working on your website is going to be the EVO Manager login page. We're going to log in. And as Nico pointed out, our content section is here. And what he was describing about all of these perhaps new concepts for you is under the Elements menu. And if you click on it and then click on any one of the headings, you then get to each of the items here. So templates, and then across in tabs are the template variables, chunks, snippets, and plugins. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk first about Google Calendar. So Google Calendar just happens to be one of several calendar options. Because of how popular Google is, many parishes use it, which is why we are going to showcase some tools around it. But if there are other calendars that you use, there may be ways to integrate those into your website as well. Perhaps you're right now manually updating your calendar on your site. One of the benefits of using Google Calendar and then this integration, which we're going to show you, is that you update your calendar once through Google Calendar's interface, and then it automatically appears on your website. And if you have it linked in other ways, maybe you have a feed going to a TV screen outside the church hall, or maybe parishioners have subscribed to the calendar. You do it once and it is available now immediately in all of those places. So let me show you what we're going to accomplish. So here on the homepage on our demo site, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and I've got what looks just like plain text, a listing of maybe some upcoming events. But really what's happening, if you look here, Thursday, January 26th at 8 a.m., Orthros and breakfast, et cetera, all of those match up. I'm going to go over to my Google Calendar tab, and let's see, today's January 25th. Here's 8 a.m. Orthros and breakfast, and then the next thing, 5 p.m. Great Vespers, et cetera. So what this snippet of code is doing is pulling everything from our Google Calendar and displaying it in a nice way right on our site. Out of the box, Google offers something similar, but it may not look, in our opinion, maybe it doesn't look as good. This is a version of Google's out of the box, what's called their iframe embed version. An iframe is just taking something from another site and displaying it in a window on your site. And so this is the iframe version of the Google Calendar code. If that works for you, go for it. We happen to like the cleaner version that is available here. This is the agenda view. And so with the agenda view, you just see a single column with all the events listed down. Again, the iframe version of it. And then here, we're going to take you over to the calendar page. So we have in our news section, a calendar page, and you can see calendar 2, which I'll show you in a minute. Now here is the grid view as a month, and we can see a week view as well. But this is the grid view of our snippet that we wrote to display the Google Calendar. And again, now here is the snippet that we wrote, and then the next tab now here is the iframe version. If you like this one, great, go for it. If you like this one, that's fine too. It's really up to you. But having it embedded on your site is absolutely the way to go. So I'm going to come back to my Google Calendar, and I'm going to, on Friday, this coming Friday, I'm going to actually add an event. And I'm going to say, house blessings. And we're going to say that it's, yeah, sure, it's all day long. So we know that maybe Father George isn't going to be in the office, but we want to have that on the church calendar. So I'm going to click save. So I've got house blessings now showing up here. I'm going to come back to my website and refresh the page. And it instantly, I mean, within a matter of seconds, it shows up on my website. And I could do the same with the iframe. Whoops, hold on. How about that? Yeah, there we go. So in the iframe version 2, house blessings. And again, if just for thoroughness, I could show you in both the full calendar embed and the iframe version, we see house blessings immediately show up. Now, let's say I wanted to add some information about that. I could go to edit that item, and I could say to learn more, contact the church office. And maybe I want to go here and grab the link for the contact page. And so I've added a little bit of information and then a link. And when I save that, I'm going to come back here now and I'm going to refresh. And you can see now that that house blessings has gotten hyperlinked. And if I click on it, right on my homepage, I now get a little bit more information there. Of course, again, for thoroughness, if I want to click through all the other versions, I can see the same information appears on all of them. So again, it doesn't matter which version you use, whether it's the iframe or the customized snippet. They all do the same thing. It's up to your preference about which one you like aesthetically. But we do recommend both either one of the grid calendars to have as a calendar page and on your homepage to list those upcoming events. So now let's dive into what that snippet looks like.
One other thing, Jamil, I was going to mention is the grid calendar from Google that's an iframe doesn't always work great on mobile.
Ah, yes.
So if you load the page on mobile.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so let me get that set up. So if you don't know this, your web browser has the ability to simulate a mobile phone. And so I've done that. And I'm going to refresh both of these pages. So this is the iframe right out of the box with Google Calendar. And as you can see what it did, it took that grid and it just kind of squished it all down. It doesn't look great. It's not the best user experience. But this right here is that grid calendar page that we saw a minute ago. And we wrote the code so that, or Nico wrote the code, so that it knew the size of the screen and to adjust the display. And so it went from the month view, which was that grid, to the agenda view. So for your mobile users, this is how they're going to see it. They're going to see the agenda view, and very easy on the eyes, easy to navigate. We can go ahead and backwards week by week. And so that's one of the advantages of writing the code, using the customized code that we've written. Thanks, Nico, for catching that one. So we're going to take a look at each of those snippets. So here on the home page, I'm going to scroll down. Now, here are some of the template variables that Nico had previously mentioned: content block 2, content block 3. We're going to come down to content block 4. And I've got GoogleCal, maximum number of events. Well, here on this display, maybe there's too many events being shown. Let me cut that down to 6. And then I'm going to save it and come back here, refresh. Maybe that aligns better with the other items in the row. And I'll just show you for example's sake what would happen if we maybe made it 16 events accidentally. We have a really imbalanced column. So you want to have some level of good aesthetic, and this may change over time depending on what you have in the other side of the other column, or the size of your events. Maybe right now it just says Great Vespers, but maybe you might see Orthros and Divine Liturgy for the Feast of the Annunciation of the Theotokos. Maybe you have really long titles, and then you're going to have to readjust as you go. But let's set that back. Go for 7. And that looks pretty good. Just a couple other things to point out. Template, we're just going to use the Google Events display. It's called a template here, TPL, but what it's actually referring to is a chunk. So I'm going to go over to chunks, and I'm going to look for the Google Events display, and there it is. And so each event uses that wrapper, the title, the where, and the start date. The grouping, we're going to group things by date. So if there's multiple events on a single date, they all get grouped under the same, Wednesday, January 25th. And then the email address. And as you can see here, this is a weird looking email address. If you're using Google Calendar, every calendar has an email address associated with it. The first calendar on the list is generally associated with your email address that's connected with the account, and all of the other sub calendars are associated with, and I'll show you back over here, one of these odd looking email addresses, a bunch of numbers and letters. That %40 is actually the ampersand at group.calendar.google.com. And because we're displaying what we've got here called the sample calendar data for templates website, that's where our data is coming from. That's why the email address looks kind of funny there. And if we go into the news section and edit our calendar, this is what the grid calendar looks like. And it's a different snippet. This one's called FullCalendar. And the only parameters that we're using here is the email address. So this is a really simple call. And I'll show you back on the home page. The GoogleCal one has a little bit more complexity. We could have requested other parameters with the FullCalendar one, but we just went for a simple display there. And we could have had fewer parameters here as well. But you'll see with different snippets, there's different ways to manipulate and customize them. So that is, I'm going to just do one more thing. And this gets into now the templates. So here we are on our home page. And I would say more often than not, people who are coming to your website are looking to find out when the services are. And on your homepage, the fact that your list of services is there is good, but why not give yourself the advantage of prioritizing it higher, perhaps, than some of this other content? So what we're going to do, we're going to come over here. So it's right now at the bottom, in the bottom right. And we're going to make it, just move it up a little higher. As Nico's warned in the previous section of this presentation, some of what we're showing you are really advanced actions. If you're in any way uncomfortable taking these steps, but you want to make adjustments, give us a call, send us an email. We're happy to work with you to improve your site. So we're going to go to Elements and then Templates. Actually, before I do that, we need to know which template we're going to be modifying. So we've got here Uses Template. That's the menu that Nico was talking about. And you can see that our homepage uses the template that's named Homepage Content Rows. So let's go back over there, and we're going to go to Templates. And then Homepage Content Rows. It's always a good idea to do a backup. The easiest backup is to just highlight the contents of what you're working on, copying it, saving it in a text file locally. There's always a chance that you can mess up something and delete it and it's gone forever. But if you have the backup, you can always revert back to it. So we're going to do a couple things. What I'm thinking is we're going to swap it out with the multi-TV here. So I'm going to take that block, put it down to the bottom of the page, and then take the block with the online chapel and the calendar, cut that, and move it up to the further to the top. And then I'm going to make one other change. I'm actually going to say, let's see. So what I'm doing here, I've reversed the order, but I'm saying for mobile, we're actually going to even in a higher priority show the calendar over the online chapel, because on a mobile device, I want someone, the very first thing they see is to be the Google Calendar. And I think I did that right. Let's just refresh and see. Okay, so on desktop, we've got the slider, and then this first blue block, and then the calendar and online chapel. And I could have adjusted more, but I just wanted to make this adjustment with the multi-TV block down here. So now that's up higher. And then I'm going to look at the mobile view. And yeah, it did do that. So on mobile, the first thing I see, other than the slider and the first blue block, is the calendar. So on mobile, the calendar appears before the online chapel, whereas on desktop, the online chapel appears before the calendar. And that's because of this order class that we've added in. These classes that you see in our templates are all part of Bootstrap. Bootstrap is the HTML framework that we're using to design our templates. If you're interested in that, there's a website called getbootstrap.com, and we're using version 4 of Bootstrap. And you can learn more about the different classes, styles, all sorts of different options that are available to you through Bootstrap 4. I think I covered everything with Google Calendar. Let's now move on to YouTube. All right, so YouTube is a great way to embed video on your website. You upload the videos to YouTube, and then with just a couple calls, you can easily add those videos to your website. And there's a couple different ways to do it. YouTube is also a Google product. So similar to Google Calendar, you can embed using an iframe. And I'll come here to this YouTube video. And if I click on share, I can then click on embed, and I get the iframe code for Father Barnabas's sermon. And I could copy that and paste that onto my website. And the other way is through some custom code that we've added in. You can see here, here's a sermon. If it will load. Seems to have run into a little bit of a snag. There we go. So I have here a sermon that is from Rochester, New York, that I have embedded onto this sermon right here, the sermon page. And I'm going to show you, let's see, what is that launching? So if you look on this page, I don't have the video anywhere in my content area. Instead, what I've done, I'm using this template variable called YouTube embed code, video code. And all I've done
showing up.
Oh, there we go. All I've done for every YouTube video, there is a V equals and then a bunch of letters and numbers, sometimes some dashes. This is the YouTube ID. All we do is take the YouTube ID, copy that, paste that into the YouTube video code. And what we have set up here will automatically display the video for you at the top of the page. Very easy. You don't need to think about copying and pasting the embed code, making sure the widths are right. I'm going to show you in contrast what happens, again, similar to that Google Calendar. So here is Father Barnabas's video. And what we did, we took the iframe for that, and I'll show you that whole process. So what we would do is come over to his YouTube video, click on share, and then click on embed. If I copy that code, come back over here to my HTML editor, and I'm going to insert/edit media, and then click embed, and I paste that code there. So it shows up there, and I know it's going to be there. When I go to save and then preview, well, it looks all right. But what happens for, let's see, what happens maybe if I have a smaller window? Well, what ends up happening is that because I've just taken the YouTube embed code right from the site, it has a fixed width. And so it breaks and it doesn't stay within the confines of my template. And then on mobile, it's even worse because it starts to just fall off the page entirely. Whereas with the functionality that we've provided, it uses responsive coding to always resize depending on the frame that of the page around it. So on mobile, it looks good, and on desktop, it looks good. Now, this isn't available right out of the box, but if it's something you're interested, we're happy to make that available to you. Now, the other way to get around this, if you just want to embed 1 or 2 videos here and there, what you want to do, and this goes back to the idea of Bootstrap. So here on the Bootstrap website, under Utilities and then Embed, this is the code that we can use for embedding a video and make it responsive. And we're going to use this. And so div is a container, and the styles, the classes that we're going to apply, embed-responsive to say this block is going to be responsive and it's going to adjust depending on the size of the window. And then embed responsive 16:9. Well, 16:9 is a ratio that works for many videos. 1920 by 1080, 1080 pixels. So we're going to take that code. And here, back to Father Barnabas's video, what I can do is just wrap that iframe, oops, in the div and then a closed div. And it seems to have disappeared here, but we trust that it's there. And if we come back to Father Barnabas's video, we can see now that it is working. But that's a few extra steps if you're going to be doing this regularly that are not necessary if you were to use the custom setup that we have with the YouTube video code. One of the other things about the YouTube video code is that it only displays at the top of a page. So let's say here on the sacraments section of your site, you wanted a video to appear right here in the middle of the page. Well, here would be an example where you would actually need to use the YouTube iframe. And so we could, let's see, we could come here to the B2B video on what is a sacrament, click on share, click on embed, copy that code, and then we go to our faith and then sacraments. And maybe we want to put it right here. And before we hit enter, we're going to wrap it around with that extra div. And again, it looks like it disappears because the tiny MCE editor doesn't know what to do with that class. But then when I refresh the page, there it is in the middle of the page for me. And because of that responsive class, it looks nice no matter what the width of the page is. So that's embedding YouTube videos. Now let's look at the sermon section as a whole. So here we are. There's a few components, and you don't really need to worry about how to set one up. If you want one, we can work with you to get it set up. But I just want to point out a couple things. So here within the news section, I have my sermon section. And I like organizing things by year. And so I have a folder for 2021 and a folder for 2022. Let's go ahead and we're going to create a web link. A web link is a pointer, and we're just going to say 2023 with a title and alias. And we're going to say that it is a container. I'm going to save. And so I'm setting myself up ready to go. Oh, actually, I'm going to come back in here. And I'm going to say, I don't want to show it in the menu because I don't want people to see that folder. All I care about are the things inside of it. And as you can see in 2022, I've got some sermons from last year. Now, if I edit the containing folder named sermons with ID of 31, I can see that I'm using this snippet called DocLister. And I'll explain news navigation in just a minute. So DocLister is the name of the snippet that we're going to use here. Ampersand parents. So anytime you see ampersand within a snippet, this is telling you what one of the parameters are. So parents, who are the parents? Basically, DocLister is saying, show me a bunch of items, a bunch of resources. And parents is saying, where's the starting place? So the starting place is number 31. And so that's why we have parents equals 31. Paginate means eventually I'm going to have enough sermons on this page that I don't want to display just one big long list. Maybe I only want to display 5 at a time or 10 at a time, 20 at a time. So that's what that is. And then along with that is display. So I only want to show 5 at a time. And depth equals 2, that's saying, even though I'm saying the starting point is number 31, the sermons, I want to go 2 levels down at most, and 2 levels down are all of my sermons. The filters here says, don't display anything where hide menu is enabled. And so show in menu, the blue items are available to be seen, whereas the ones that are gray, 2021, 2022, and 2023 folders were unchecked. And so those won't be shown at all. Show me only things that are published. Allow me to use an image as one of the custom template variables. And then use this template, the news template. And then finally, show things in this order with the pub date. So in order of published date in reverse chronological order. That's what that means. So we're going to see the most recent ones first, and then the oldest ones last. If that's overwhelming for you, what we just covered, that's okay. If you got it and you're like, great, I'm in it to win it, that's great too. If you look at the end product in the demo that we're showing you and you say, this is something that I want to have for my website, then just let us know and we can implement that for you. So here's the end product. and I see in reverse chronological order all of the items within the folders, and it's not showing the folders 2021, 2022, etc. It's skipping those. And you can see that I have only 5 items showing at a time, even though there are 9 total items. So I can go to the second page and see all of the rest of them. For any one of these items, if I were to edit it, we can see that I have a title and a long title, which I'm using as the same. The summary is what shows up on the page here. So each Sunday in Great Lent, there's a specific theme, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what shows up here. And then I have body content, and we're using, just for the sake of the demo, what's called lorem ipsum text. And that's just a bunch of gibberish Latin text that's used for copywriting to display. So don't get thrown off by that at all. And then when I click on the item, I get the video, and then I get the body text. So here's my body text. And as we saw a few minutes ago, a little further down is the YouTube video code, and there it is. Under settings, I've explicitly set a date. I've said that this sermon was from March 20th, 2022. And then under SEO, I've defined an image. As you can see here, I'm not bothering to create an image. I'm just taking the image that YouTube has provided me. And you can get this URL if you do a little bit of Googling. If I search for YouTube Max image URL, there's all sorts of search results that show you the URLs that YouTube makes available to display the image associated with a video. And you can see on each one of these, it says the URL, but then right in the middle, insert YouTube video ID here. So that's where you would replace that with the video ID. So you could take that and use that if you wanted to use it within the website, or maybe you just want to download a nice high-res version of whatever video you're uploading to YouTube, and there you can have it and use it. So I want to just point out one other thing. Again, there's a lot to take in here. Just want to point out the news template. So under chunks, even though it's called a template, it's actually a chunk. And I've got my news template here. If I come back here, if I wanted to make a change, I can see that that link is not loading for some reason. I can see that the image is clickable, and then the read more is clickable, but the title is not clickable. Maybe I want to make that adjustment. So let me take the link and wrap it around the title. And I'm going to get rid of this class. Save that. Now when I refresh the page, patience, not sure why it's taking so long now. We'll let it load, and we can see now the titles are all linkable. All right, we're running low on time. Just want to point out a couple others just really quickly, and then we'll wind down. Let me just clear out. There we go. All right. So on my welcome page, I have some text welcoming people, and then right in the middle of the article, or at the end of the article, I give people some more options on what to do. So you can learn more by learning about our parish history or our faith or patron saint. Now, you could have just generated that list of links manually, but what we've actually done is saved ourselves the time. And if I come to my welcome page, you can see that we didn't write out those links. All we did was use this snippet called DL menu to generate the list of links. And similar to the sermon section, we said that the starting point, the parents, is ID number 2, community. And filters, I don't want to display document number 8 because that's the page that this list is on. So skip that. That's what the filters is. And then the maximum depth of 2. Let's say maybe I don't want to display the items within the parish ministries folder. I want people to only see parish ministries as the option. I can change max depth 2 to max depth equals 1. And then when I refresh that page, the bulleted list gets updated. And that way, if I'm ever working on a page and maybe I want someone to not see the patron saint page because we're working on it. Well, I don't need to think, oh, where have I linked to it? What do I need to update? I can just unpublish it in the manager and it's gone from this list. So that's where the power of these snippets comes in. You do it in one place and it affects everywhere else. So similarly, and this will be the last thing I show, in the Our Faith section, which appears on many of your sites, we've got a set of articles that comes out of the box. And for some of you, you have at the bottom this visual list of additional articles from within the section. And so what we've done on each of those articles in the Our Faith section, if I click on any one of them, at the very bottom, I see this is a chunk, Our Faith -more. So that says maybe we need to explore more. So let's go to chunks and then Our Faith More. So if you remember, one of the things that Nico said about chunks is that they're reusable. And so on every one of these pages, we reference that chunk. And that way, if we ever need to make a change, we make it once and then it automatically changes everywhere else. So on the Our Faith More chunk, we've got some HTML, a title, a description, some more text below, but right in the middle, we've got the DocLister snippet. So DocLister is saying how many items you want to display at most, which is 20. What's the starting point? Who are the parents? It's document number 3. And then et cetera, what template are we using? And all of that combined gives us this. And again, if we wanted to maybe unpublish the House of God section, I can refresh and it's gone. And then once I'm ready to republish, it's back there and I realize, oh, nativity's over. Let me unpublish the nativity content. But maybe I have some Lenten content. I'll add that in. I don't need to delete the nativity content. I can save that in an unpublished state in anticipation for next year. But I leave it unpublished, but then all of the rest still appears. So there's so much more that we could say. I know we're at an hour now. I'll stop it there. If any of you need to go, feel free to go. What we'll do, we'll edit this video and post it online, but we're available. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. It looks like there's some stuff in the chat.